Before we start, just a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. Only 2% are subscribed. At 1,000 subscribers, I'll be posting a special video. The light flipped green, and my phone buzzed hard. Wipers thudded across the windshield and smeared city neon. I thumbed the screen, and rain drummed the roof. A new text blinked cold white in the cup holder. Who needs comfort at midnight like this? I read it twice and gripped the leather wheel. I'm Daniel, 34, and my chest jumped once. She's hurting after the divorce, the message said flat. I'm with her now, the second line followed slow. My knuckles went pale under the dashboard glow. I pulled into our lot and killed the engine. Exhaust ghosted behind a bumper and curled upward. The metal fob clicked heavy against my keys. Water ran down my sleeve and chilled the wrist. Why did this feel like a warning siren? The stairwell smelled like wet concrete and old paint. My boots slapped each step and echoed tight. A flyer peeled on the wall near the banister. The bulb hummed above the landing and flickered once. Everything said hurry, yet also said wait. The apartment door stuck and then gave with a sigh. Warm air hit me and carried rosemary and wine. A red Dutch oven space gaped on a rack. A wooden spoon dripped onto the counter edge. Who carries soup out this late anyway? I set my wallet beside the fruit bowl gently. The sink steamed faintly and clouded the faucet. A single bowl waited clean on the drying mat. Water beaded on the rim and caught light. Someone had moved through here in a rush. I walked the hallway and felt the runner's grit. The living room lamp threw amber over the couch. Her throw blanket lay folded sharp on the armrest. The remote sat centered on the glass table. Nothing looked messy, but everything felt staged. I texted back and let the bubble hang. Are you safe? I typed and watched dots. The fridge rattled softly and shook a magnet. Of course, she wrote, and then nothing else. Silence hummed louder than the old compressor. I opened the bedroom and caught cold air. Our quilt felt dry and rough under my palm. Her nightstand sat neat with a pearl hair clip. The alarm clock blinked 12:27 in weak blue. The bed looked untouched yet not innocent. I went to the bathroom and wiped the mirror. Steam ghosted back and blurred my face again. Her floral shampoo hung thick over the tub. A damp towel drooped from the silver hook. She had showered fast and left in haste. Back in the kitchen, the window tapped with rain. I listened to the city and held the ladle. The spice jar lay uncapped near the stove. Time flecks dotted the burner and smelled earthy. She had cooked comfort like a practice story. My phone buzzed again and skittered slightly. Don't wait up, she texted and added a heart. I stared at the tiny red shape on glass. It glowed like a brake light in fog. Why did that heart feel like a stop? I poured coffee and tasted metal from the mug. The kettle clicked empty and snapped my nerves. I rubbed the ceramic handle and watched the door. Wind pushed at the frame and made it creak. Every sound asked me to believe or doubt. I sat on the couch and traced the seam. The fabric rasped under my thumb and heated. Her scarf hung on a chair with rain beads. It smelled like citrus and something sweeter underneath. Who was she warming with that brightness tonight? Headlights swept the blinds and striped the wall. Tires hissed along puddles and then faded off. I checked the time and felt my pulse spike. A drop fell from the ceiling vent and blinked. I had never heard the apartment so dramatic. Keys finally scraped outside and paused too long. The deadbolt turned slow and then clicked home. The door opened and cool air slid inside. Mara stepped in with a paper bag sagging. Her eyes shined like glass under the lamp. Hey, I said and set the mug down. Hi, she said and kicked her heels softly. Rainwater dripped from her umbrella onto the mat. She closed it slowly and shook off droplets. Her smile held and did not reach me. You cooked, I said and nodded at the stove. Yeah, she said and lifted the bag slightly. Did she eat? I asked and watched her zipper. She tried, she said and rubbed her sleeve. Her perfume drifted bright and then dulled. She needed company, she said and put the bag down. I noticed the red lid peeking from the paper. She wiped the counter with a folded towel. The clock ticked hard above the pantry door. Company sounded heavier than that towel felt. What time did you get there? I asked quietly. She set her phone face down near the fruit. Late, she said and adjusted the lamp chain. Light sharpened across the knives in the block. Late stretched between us like a taut wire. "She's a wreck," she said and found a glass. Water ran bright and cold into the sink. She drank fast and set the tumbler carefully. It left a ring that spread like a ripple. The ring kept growing while she watched it. I held the spoon and felt oil on wood. "Do you trust me?" I asked and breathed slow. She looked at the spoon and then my hands. "I'm trying," she said and touched the counter. Trying felt thinner than the steam still rising. She brushed past and the scarf grazed my wrist. Her skin felt cool and the fabric snagged. She opened the fridge and light washed her face. A jar clinked on the shelf near the milk. I saw tired eyes and something walled off. "I'm beat," she said and pinched the bridge. I nodded and watched her pick at the label. She took the red lid and tucked it deeper. Paper crackled like dry leaves in a gutter. What was hiding under that careful noise? I turned off the lamp and listened to rain. The hallway glowed faint from the bedroom screen. Our cat toy rolled against the baseboards softly. It thumped once and settled by the heater. Something in me refused to settle with it. The kettle screamed and I yanked it off the flame. Steam slapped my face and stung my eyes. Sunlight sliced the counter and lit the metal spoon. Her phone buzzed near the fruit bowl and flashed once. Who needs her at dawn again like this? I opened the fridge and smelled cold garlic and sesame. 2 white cartons sweated beside the orange juice. A spare set of chopsticks lay on the shelf. Condensation dripped onto the glass and pooled thin. Who shared noodles here while the city slept? On the table I saw twin rings in wood. Coffee had dried into brown halos around a coaster. A cloth napkin lay twisted and smelled like cologne. Dust glittered in the beam from the blinds. 2 rings and 1 story did not fit. She patted in and rubbed soap across her wrists. Water dripped from her hair and darkened her sweater. She picked a grape and watched the sink. "Rough night," I said and set the mug down. Her pupils caught the window light and narrowed. I held her hand, she said, and chewed slow. "She cried until 3, she said and reached a plate. I wiped the counter and felt crumbs stick. "Where does she live?" I asked and kept steady. Her jaw tightened like a knot in rope. "Midtown," she said and touched the faucet handle. "North side near the park," she said quietly. The faucet clicked and hissed a thin stream. I watched the stream run silver across steel. Specifics felt ready like cards on a table. She left her keys near the cutting board. The keychain clinked and flashed under the light. Her watch lit next and showed a calendar alert. A small bell chimed from the band and faded. Support group at 10 looked neat and bold. I lowered my voice and touched the tablet screen. The shared calendar opened with a pale glow. The event pinned to a co-working address downtown. A map tile loaded slowly and blinked blue. Why meet grief with Wi-Fi and conference chairs? The printer coughed and spat a single sheet. A vendor logo sat black at the corner. 2 bottles listed with delivery at 11:40. Paper warmed my palm and carried toner smell. Who needs wine after a night of tissues? She saw the page and slid the drawer shut. "Don't," she said and closed the printer tray. Her nails tapped the plastic and echoed faint. "I like a glass," she said and looked away. The drawer thumped like a heartbeat under the desk. She reached for the toothbrush by the mirror. Mint rose sharp and bright in the bathroom light. A second brush leaned wet against the cup. Water curled along the rim and dripped steady. Were we hosting ghosts with good dental habits? "I'm checking on her again," she said and zipped up. I watched the zipper teeth catch then smooth. She grabbed the canvas tote from the chair. Perfume lifted off the fabric and went sweet. "Text me," I said and held the door. "I will," she said and stepped into the hall. The elevator bell dinged and swallowed her footsteps. I stood by the umbrella with my jaw tight. Rain ticked against the window and ran thin. The apartment felt staged and watching me breathe. I opened the laptop and scrolled our inbox. The fan whirred and warmed my thighs through denim. A ride receipt blinked unread in bold letters. Drop last night showed our address at 112. Comfort had a habit of finding my living room. The doorbell rang and rattled the picture frame. A package thumped against the mat with a scrape. I sniffed damp cardboard and peeled up a corner. The label showed our street with a wrong name. Who is JH, and why here now? I carried it inside and set it by the lamp. Tape tugged at my fingers with a gritty pull. Inside sat a black cap with gold stitching. A receipt showed a sports shop on Oak Avenue. No one here wears team colors to cry. Laundry hummed and the drum knocked once hard. I lifted the lid and heat rolled out. A gray hoodie lay heavy on damp towels. Cologne punched the air and settled like smoke. The tag read XL with a cracked logo. In the pocket, I felt a stiff card. Edges scraped my thumb and lifted lint dust. It read Lena's place with a midtown address. Ink bled at the corner in a blue stain. Her grief had business cards and branded nights. I unlocked my phone and searched the name. White light burned my eyes and made me blink. A photo loaded of a bright lobby sign. Polished marble shone under overhead LEDs and plants. The posted hours ended before her last text. Down the hall, the cat toy rolled and clicked. The heater kicked on and hissed like a whisper. I set the hoodie on the chair and watched. The chair cloth scratched my palm and held heat. I decided to wait with the cap staring back. The elevator dinged again and footsteps approached slow. Rain smelled blew in under the door and rose. Keys rasped the lock and metal tapped wood. I looked at the hoodie and then the cap. What story would she pick when she saw them? Keys scraped the lock and the door swung wide. Rain hissed in behind her and chilled my shins. She stepped over the threshold and saw the chair. The gray hoodie lay folded next to the cap. Her breath caught like a snapped thread. Why pause now? She shut the door and leaned on the frame. Perfume lifted sweet and mixed with wet concrete. I was rushing, she said and wiped her cheek. I pointed at the cap on the lamp. Whose is it? I asked and kept still. A friend, she said and smoothed her sleeve. The lampshade glowed warm across the coffee table. I rolled the brim between my fingers and waited. Gold stitching scratched my thumb and felt stubborn. What friend brings his hat here at night? It's nothing, she said and squeezed the tote. Canvas creaked in her grip near the zipper. Name, I said and set the cap down. Her eyes flicked to the hoodie and back. Josh, she said, and the room tightened. I lifted the hoodie and smelled heavy cologne. The fabric stuck damp to my knuckles and clung. He left it where? I asked and watched her mouth. In my car, she said and picked at lint. Her voice thinned under the kitchen light's bus. The watch on her wrist chimed a small bell. A calendar card flashed bright near the band. Support group, she said and reached for a glass. Water hit the sink with a hard splash. I should go soon, she added and waited. Where today? I asked and moved to the counter. The marble felt cold and slick under my palm. Downtown, she said and slid her phone away. A drip ran from the umbrella into a puddle. Same spot, she said and looked past me. Her phone buzzed again and lit the fruit bowl. A preview flashed white against red apples briefly. Thanks again for last night, the text read. A firework pop sounded from the hallway heater. The center line showed one clean word, Josh. Who was that? I asked and pointed at it. Nobody, she said and turned the screen face down. The case thumped hollow on the wooden table. Her fingers stayed there and pressed the edge. Nobody's text with gratitude and timestamps. I'll walk you down, I said and grabbed my keys. Metal clicked against the bowl and rang once. She tightened her scarf and watched the mirror. The mirror threw white light along the hallway. She nodded twice like rehearsing a line. The elevator side opened and smelled like lemon cleaner. A folded flyer lay by the button and curled. We rode in silence while cables hummed above us. She ran a thumb along the cold handrail slowly. Text me, I said, and she barely nodded. I waited in the lobby and watched the door. Traffic sloshed outside and tossed headlights through glass. She lifted the tote and walked into the rain. Her hood rose and hid half her face. I followed at a distance with my jaw tight. The street tasted like metal and wet dust. A streetcar bell clanged near the corner ahead. She cut left by the newsstand with blue lights. A stack of magazines leaned under a flickering sign. She kept moving and never checked behind her. I stayed in the shop and breathed ink and paper. Newsprint stained my fingers and smudged the rack. Through the window, I watched her cross mid-block. She stopped by a black sedan and tapped glass. The driver waved and unlocked the door. I stepped back as the sedan lights flicked. Rain hammered the roof and drowned the radio. The car pulled out and turned toward Oak Avenue. A takeout menu stuck to the door scratched my wrist. Oak Avenue burned neon through low clouds ahead. I jogged to the corner and flagged a cab. Vinyl seats squeaked under me and felt sticky. "Follow the black sedan," I said and pointed. The driver grunted once and pulled into traffic. Wipers slapped time against a tinny song. We slid past a liquor store with bright posters. Glass glowed green and gold along the sidewalk. The sedan slowed near Lena's Place sign. White letters hummed under warm bar lights. My stomach nodded while the engine idled low. They parked and stepped into the doorway together. Her scarf flashed orange under the awning light. A man held the door and shook off rain. His cap matched the stitching on my table. He laughed once and touched her elbow. I paid the driver and stepped into wet air. The awning dripped steady like a ticking clock. Inside smelled like wine and toasted bread. A host stand held a leather book and pen. I watched them slide into a corner booth. "Table for one," the host asked, and followed my look. "Bar," I said, and took a high stool. My palms stuck to the polish for a moment. Bottles glowed amber under the mirrored shelf. I faced their booth and counted their inches. She leaned in and spoke into his shoulder. Her hand rested on the menu and trembled. He set a phone on the table near hers. Blue light lit their wrists in a soft square. They smiled like a secret had permission. The bartender wiped a glass with a gray cloth. "You good?" he asked and watched my stare. "Water," I said and tapped the coaster edge. Cold beads ran down the tumbler and pooled. "Do they come here often?" I asked and waited. "Sometimes," he said and set the cloth down. His eyes flicked to the corner and back. "Name?" I asked and kept my voice low. "Josh," he said and reached for a bottle. The bottle clinked against another and rang. I slid a crumpled receipt toward his side. Toner smell rose from the damp paper top. "Seen this logo?" I asked and tapped it. He nodded once and glanced at their booth. "Delivery for them last week," he said softly. I turned back and felt the stool wobble. The floorboard groaned under a shifting leg. They raised their glasses and touched rims lightly. The sound rang like a bell in a church. Her smile widened and then dropped fast. She saw me and froze with the glass suspended. Red wine tilted close to the rim and held. He followed her eyes and straightened in the seat. The candle between them hissed and flickered hard. I lifted my tumbler and waited for their story. I stood from the bar and the stool groaned. My glass sweat cooled my palm and dripped. Candlelight shook over their booth and danced. I set the tumbler down hard on wood. Both of them flinched like a mirror cracked. "Hey," I said and held the menu edge. "Hey," she said and smoothed the paper. "Join us," he said and straightened his cap. The booth vinyl squeaked and smelled like lemon. I pulled a chair and let it scrape. The candle hissed and spit a tiny spark. I watched the flame and then their hands. His watch flashed silver under the low light. Her ring tapped the water glass and paused. "Who taps like that when nothing is wrong?" "What you doing here?" she asked quietly. "Following the story," I said and touched the coaster. "We were eating," he said and lifted his fork. Fork tines clinked the plate and rang thin. The sound hung between us like a wire. The bartender slid water and nodded once. I knocked the glass and cooled my throat. "Everything good?" he asked and watched their faces. "All good," he said before I could answer. That rush smelled like fear wrapped in aftershave. "Comfort looks cozy tonight," I said and waited. She gripped the napkin and crushed it small. "Don't do this here," she said and blinked hard. The overhead lamp threw gold on the salt shaker. I could almost hear the shaker mark time. "Step outside," I said and stood slowly. Chairs scraped as I moved from the table. Rain thudded the awning and bled streetlight. He pushed back and blocked the aisle with shoulders. People turned and pretended not to stare. "We can talk," he said and raised both hands. His voice carried over clattering dishes and chatter. "Move," I said and touched the booth edge. The wood felt sticky and warm under skin. He shifted an inch and made me smaller. "2 minutes," she said and grabbed her tote. Her perfume flashed bright and then went sour. We reached the doorway where wind blew hard. A red umbrella hung on a hook by glass. She didn't reach for it as rain hammered. "Who is she?" I asked and held my phone. Streetlight cut her cheekbones and left shadows. "There is no she," she said and swallowed. My screen glowed cold blue in the night. Her life fog in the air and hung. "You texted she last night," I said flat. "I meant him," she said and looked down. "Why change pronouns when you cross streets?" I asked. A bus roared past and sprayed our shoes. The umbrella swayed like a pendulum near us. "He's going through hell," she said and steadied. "You don't get divorce nights," she said and shook. Rain peppered the awning and dripped rhythmically. Her tote strap dug into her shoulder hard. I waited for a reason that could breathe. "He doesn't need you," I said and pointed inside. "He needed someone," she said and hugged herself. "He has friends," I said and watched the door. The door glass smeared neon across his outline. He stood there like a problem with shoes. "I'm here," he said and stepped into rain. Water ran off his cap brim and sheets. "Back inside," I said and kept my voice low. He set a hand on the metal railing slowly. The metal shook like it heard my pulse. "This isn't what you think," he said and waited. "What do I think?" I said and lifted the phone. I pulled up the map and watched it glow. Blue dots crawled across the screen like ants. Stops lit up that didn't match a grieving route. "You followed me," she said and drew a breath. "You kept secrets," I said and locked my jaw. The awning drip hit my collar and spread cold. A taxi idled nearby and splashed oily puddles. She blinked fast and then finally steadied. "We met at work after hours," she said softly. "Paperwork dragged late and spilled into drinks," she said. A siren wailed 2 blocks over and curved. Her knuckles whitened on the toad zipper. "Late always seems to like a bar." "We filed shipping claims," he said and shrugged. "Inventory is brutal at quarter end," he said. The neon above us buzzed and flickered weak. A lighter clacked in his pocket, then stilled. He wore excuses like a uniform under rain. "Show me the claim," I said and reached. He opened his phone and squinted through drops. A PDF gleamed under the cracked screen glare. Numbers looked real enough to a stranger. Page 2 showed a timestamp after closing hours. "You can't live like this," she said gently. "You're combing receipts while I hold tears," she said. Car horns layered in the distance like drums. Her tote slipped and hit my knee once. I caught it before it fell into water. Inside the tote, something plastic scraped hard. I felt a card edge and pulled it out. A white keycard flashed in the streetlight beam. The logo read Harbor Suites with crisp lines. His eyes flicked there before he looked away. "Explain that," I said and held it high. "We booked a room for a coworker," he said. "Her lease ended and she needed a bed," he said. Rain found my collarbone and ran down slow. The hotel name pressed cold into my thumb. "Whose name on file?" I asked and waited. "Not mine," he said and chewed his lip. The revolving door spun and whooshed warm air. Grease smell from the kitchen slid under it. I watched her face instead of his mouth. "We used my card," she said, and met me. "It was cheaper with points," she said quickly. Her breath smoked the glass and faded fast. The umbrella hook creaked under rain weight. Points have a way of buying long nights. "Come home now," I said and tucked the card. "We'll talk without a crowd," I said and turned. She glanced at him and he looked back hard. Headlights washed us white for a blunt second. I didn't miss the way their shoulders leaned. "I'll get the check," he said and stepped inside. The door whispered shut behind his broad back. She rubbed her wrist and stared at the sidewalk. A receipt fluttered from the awning post and stuck. Ink bled as water crawled across the numbers. I picked the receipt and felt paper go soft. The total included a dessert for 2. A note read corner booth and house poor. The font blurred in the wet yellow light. She watched my hands like they held a verdict. "Was a coworker here too?" I asked quietly. "No," she said and closed her eyes briefly. The wind lifted her hair and whipped it. A delivery van growled at the curb and idled. My silence across the sidewalk felt heavier. He returned with a leather folder and nodded. "Give her space," he said and kept distance. The folder smelled like polish and old bills. He tucked a card slip into his jacket pocket. That pocket bulged like it had more stories. "We're going," I said and held the door. She stepped past me and didn't meet my eyes. Warm bar air hugged our clothes and steamed. Chatter rose and clinked around the host stand. The candle at their booth had burned lower. Outside, the rain eased and left a wet shine. Streetlights smeared across puddles and made bands. We walked to the corner with our breaths loud. A passing bus threw warm diesel at our faces. We stood at the crosswalk like strangers with mail. "Talk tonight," I said and lifted my hood. She nodded once and watched a flyer flutter. The flyer slapped a pole and stuck damp. Her gaze stayed on that cheap white paper. I knew the night had one more turn. The door shut behind us, and the chain rattled. Wet will smell rose from her coat and filled the hall. She dropped the tote on the doormat and exhaled. Streetlights slid into the threshold and cut a stripe. I locked the deadbolt and counted my own breaths. She draped her jacket over the chair and shivered. Water tapped from the hem onto the hardwood. The kettle hummed on the stove and grew louder. A chipped mug sat waiting by the spoon rest. Heat moved, but the room felt colder. "I need water," she said and opened the tap. The flow hissed against steel and then steadied. A glass fogged in her hand and bumped porcelain. She set it near the fruit bowl and blinked. I watched the rim shake like a nerve. "Talk to me," I said and touched the counter. The marble felt slick and unkind under my palm. She folded a dish towel and found the seam. The towel smelled like lemon and old soap. Her hands shook, but her eyes stayed dry. "It was a bad night," she said and swallowed. "It got complicated," she said and lifted the glass. The fridge motor kicked on and rattled the magnets. A grocery flyer curled behind the handle and trembled. Complicated sounded polite for something burning. I set the key card on the table and waited. The plastic clicked against the wooden coaster clean. Light from the pendant lamp flashed on its logo. Her breath caught sharp and then slipped out slow. "Names on cards like this cost more than soup." "What is that?" she asked and rubbed her wrist. "You tell me," I said and nudged it closer. Air felt heavy like damp on my shoulders. The chair legs scraped the floor and squealed. She looked at the card as if it bit. "It wasn't for me," she said and stared down. "It was for someone scared of sleeping alone," she said. The faucet dripped once and echoed in steel. A sponge slumped in the sink beside a knife. Her voice thinned and then tried to recover. "Who slept there?" I asked and held the knife flat. Metal felt cold on my fingertips and steadied me. She reached for the tote and pulled the zipper. Fabric rasped across the table like sand on glass. A hotel shampoo rolled out and tapped twice. I opened the trash can and smelled sweet latex. A black bag rustled as I lifted the lid. Something crinkled beneath coffee grounds and onion skins. A torn foil square winked under the pale light. It glared at me like a sudden siren. "What is that?" she asked and grabbed my sleeve. "Evidence," I said and pinched the wrapper edge. Powder dusted my fingertips and stuck like chalk. I set it on the counter beside the magnet. Silence hummed the length of the kitchen. "It wasn't us," she said and shook her head. "Who then?" I said and pointed at the foil. The wall clock ticked hard and measured seconds. A ceramic jar of sugar sat squat and innocent. She stared at the jar as if it could lie. "Someone else used our place," she said finally. "While you were gone," she said and met my eyes. The pendant light buzzed and cast a tight halo. The dish rack held 2 plates still dry. The story bent like hot plastic over flame. "Show me a message," I said and held my palm. She slid her phone across the table reluctantly. The glass felt warm from her skin and hummed. A notification shade blinked with muted threads and dots. I scrolled and felt my throat go sand. "Call him now," I said and laid the phone down. "I don't want to," she said and pulled back. The air smelled like overboiled time and worry. A wooden spoon cast a thin shadow across tile. Refusal sounded practiced and very recent. The bedroom stood dark and cool like a cave. I flicked the switch and washed it with amber. The quilt held a faint heat in the center. A metal hairpin glittered near the baseboard and dared. I picked it up and felt its sharp teeth. "Not mine," she said and folded her arms tight. "Whose then?" I said and set it on the dresser. Our mirror caught the lamp and filled the frame. Smudges crawled along the glass in soft streaks. I saw us both smaller than our voices. I dropped to one knee and checked under the bed. Dust tickled my nose and made my eyes water. A cufflink rolled from the edge and clicked twice. Its face showed a tiny compass under resin. The arrow pointed nowhere useful in this room. "We hosted a storm," she said and half smiled. "This is spun straw," I said and held the link. The heater kicked on and pushed warm air. A paperback slid down from the nightstand corner. Her lips pressed flat like a sealed letter. Back in the hall, the dryer thumped unevenly again. Heat puffed from the vent with a tired breath. I opened the lid and the light flared harsh. A white hand towel bore a thin wine crescent. The stain glowed like a small moon. "Say his name," I said and closed the lid. She leaned on the washer and swallowed painfully. "Josh," she said and looked at the floor. The tile felt colder through my socks suddenly. That single syllable rang like a dropped coin. "It was a mistake," she said and reached out. I stepped back and hit the doorframe with shoulder. Pine cleaner lifted from the wood and stung. A nailhead caught my sleeve and snagged threads. Her hand hung in the air and trembled. "How many mistakes fit in a week?" I asked. She pressed her ring against the dryer and tapped. The tapping echoed thin inside the metal drum. A laundry basket sat crooked on the rug. She stopped tapping and breathed through her nose. "We ended it tonight," she said and closed her eyes. "I told him not to call anymore," she said. The lamp in the living room hummed dimly. A coaster lay upside down near the remote. I flipped the coaster and saw a phone number. I walked to the window and cracked it slightly. Cool street air moved the curtain and soothed. A siren faded far away down the block. The keycard sat where I left it on wood. Its edges caught the light like a blade. "Stay and talk or go and pack," I said. My throat felt raw from holding back words. She looked at the sofa and then the door. Rain pattered softer against the glass like static. She took a breath that sounded like surrender. She knelt by the closet and pulled a suitcase out. Leather smelled of cedar and old dust under the lamp. The zipper rasped along the teeth and snagged once. I watched her hands shake over the dark fabric. Was this goodbye or finally the truth? She set the suitcase upright and breathed through her nose. I held the edge of the table for balance. "It started after the papers came," she said. "He stopped calling nights," she whispered. "I didn't want the apartment to feel empty, ever." "How many times?" I asked and braced for the drop. "3," she said and touched the keycard on wood. "Once at the hotel and twice in his place." The air vent hummed above us in a dull line. My stomach followed that line straight down. "In our bed?" I asked and stared at the pillow. "Once after the storm," she said. "You were at the office on a deadline," she said. The room smelled of his cologne and rain that night. The lamp threw gold across the sheets like proof. "Why him?" I asked and steadied the shaking glass. "Because he needed me, and I liked that," she said. "Because I was angry, you kept distance," she said. "Because being chosen felt warm as a heater's breath." Her ring scraped the table and clicked like a metronome. I set my ring in the small ceramic dish. Porcelain felt cold on my skin and unforgiving. "We need space tonight," I said and kept my tone flat. "Pack a bag and take the hotel card." Light pooled on the dish and looked like frost. "Can we try a counselor?" she asked and wrung the towel. The towel left damp lines across her knuckles slowly. "I can call tomorrow morning," she said. "If you want," she added. The refrigerator clicked like a clock running out. She zipped the suitcase and the teeth rasped again. Clothes thudded inside like soft knocks from nowhere. At the door, she paused under the hallway light. "I'm sorry," she said and pressed her palm to wood. The latch clicked shut and left the room too bright.